What Mayor Lightfoot wants to do and what she introduced in City Council today was to combat gun violence. She wants to sue gang members. This comes from Block Club Chicago, Justin Lawrence. The ordinance would enable the city to sue purported gang members in civil court and try to seize their assets. But critics say the plan relies on an error-ridden gang database that was supposed to be overhauled.
The Victims' Justice Ordinance is a civil remedy that directly targets the gang leadership and others who wield guns and drive violence in our city by seizing the assets that fuel and perpetuate their lifestyle. To be very blunt and clear, we are going after their blood money that they have profited from the killing of innocents in our neighborhoods, our children, our elders, and others that they indiscriminately kill in their quest for profits in this business that they are in. We have to move and strike hard but decisive blows against these gang members. What I know is this: there are residents all across our city, in virtually every neighborhood, who do not feel safe. And they do not feel safe because of violent criminal gangs. We have to address those fears. We have to never forget the victims and the survivors and the witnesses who every single day are being challenged by violent criminal enterprises that profit from the chaos that they wreak in our neighborhoods.
The ordinance mirrors a state law and would empower the city's corporation counsel, currently Celia Meza, to bypass the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and sue to seize the assets of purported gang members and criminal networks. And she actually went on and did a press conference after the city council meeting, which I think that you did watch also, because I tuned into it.
Yeah, well, I missed the first 20 minutes or so, but basically she spent a good portion of time trying to justify this action, which really just sounds like making civil asset forfeiture on steroids.
It's become clear that it's not enough to go after these gangs and their members through criminal courts. That is why this proposed ordinance activates our civil courts and our corporation counsel to stem the influence and power that gangs have over our residents and our neighborhoods. This method of going after gangs' profit motives is not a novel idea. Some years back, the Illinois General Assembly passed the Illinois Street Gang Terrorism Omnibus Prevention Act, which allows states' attorneys to file a civil lawsuit against gangs and gang members who engage in a pattern of criminal activity. Our proposed ordinance mirrors many of the provisions of that act, but authorizes the city, through the Corporation Council, to file civil claims against these gangs. This ordinance thus not only aims to disrupt the livelihood and power of gangs by seizing their assets, it will provide another tool for the city to fight these violent criminal gangs. It will also remedy the neighborhoods and the residents who are under siege. The ordinance stipulates that a minimum of 50% of monetary fines recovered will be dedicated to support victims of and witnesses to gang-related activity. The ordinance will require proof that any named gang member who has committed at least 2 criminal acts within the preceding 5 years would be eligible for prosecution under the civil procedure. One of which must be the violent act, one of which must involve a violent or predatory felony motivated by gang-related profit, and proof that the defendant's acts impose costs upon the city. The Corporation Council will be authorized to work with the Chicago Police Department and other law enforcement bodies across our city, county, and state and federal law enforcement to gather information and potentially any other relevant acts to prove up the acts alleged in the complaint. We will go to work. We'll go about this work maintaining the constitutional right of every citizen to remain a top priority. We will not interfere with the free exercise of constitutionally protected freedom of expression and association. Any defendants identified through this ordinance will maintain the right to petition lawfully constitutional authority for redress and pursue grievances. And let me be clear, because there's been a lot of conversation about this proposed ordinance. We are not targeting the guys on the corner, the small players, their families, or single communities. But But we are very much so targeting the gang leadership that profits from drug sales, organized criminal activity, and the violence that is perpetrated in our streets on a daily basis. And we intend to hold them to account.
I mean, the police, I think, already have that power, but now they want to focus on what they're going to claim to be gang members, but you never know how it's going to be used and abused by PD or anyone in politics, in Chicago politics, with an agenda.
Like a Jim Gardner?
That is a good example.
Well, she argues that if it's successful, the tactic would interrupt the gang's leadership structure and take away the profit motive of gun violence. And she and the colleagues that she had at this press conference today were talking about how much gangs love money.
What else does a gang member hold near and dear to his heart? It's money. It's not his loyal followers. It's not the drugs themselves that they're out selling and peddling, but they hold their money near and dear to their heart. If we could hit them where it hurts the most so that our residents can be better protected, I'll sign on to that any day and support an ordinance that does that.
The Corporation Council could work with any federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies to gather data, collect, and share evidence information potentially relevant in order to file complaints. Last week, the ordinance was set to be rushed through City Council.
On the gang ordinance, I wanted to ask a little bit of the timing of the rollout. It seemed at first like the plan was to bring it up in advance of today so that it could potentially be approved today. How did that end up getting delayed?
So you all were speculating about a lot of things. We introduced the ordinance. The ordinance will eventually get to the Public Safety Committee. There'll be a full vetting of that ordinance, and then my hope is that it will be passed.
And when I see things rushed through City Council, I remember the parking meter deal. A lot of things get rushed through City Council that we wonder why they were rushed later instead of, looking at every fucking detail to make sure that something didn't slide through that people are going to abuse. But now the timeline is unclear. It initially was scheduled to be introduced Monday before the Committee on Public Safety, but that meeting was canceled. A draft of the proposed ordinance was sent to Alderman Thursday, but briefings scheduled for Friday also were called off. The mayor's office didn't explain why. All right, so let's jump into why this is probably a bad idea. There was a report that was previously. Oh, I love this meme too that I found. Should we sue the gangbangers or should we spend $1.9 billion in transformative community investment? I don't know.
Yeah.
Tough decision.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. The thing you always say that, why they always go for the reactive solutions instead of the preventative ones.
Exactly. So this was previously reported on by the Reader back in 2016 because the Chicago Police Department has a secret budget that's directly funded by all of these civil asset forfeitures. And I want to quote from the Reader article. The Reader documented, this is 2016, for the first time, the full size and scope of CPD's civil forfeiture program, how much money it brings in and how it spends its take. Through numerous Freedom of Information Act requests, the Reader, working with the Chicago-based transparency nonprofit Lucy Parsons Labs and the public records website Muckrock, obtained more than 1,000 pages of CPD documents, including the department's deposit and expenditure ledgers, internal emails, and purchasing records that offer an unprecedented look into how Chicago police and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office make lucrative use of civil asset forfeiture. Since 2009, the year CPD began keeping electronic records of its forfeiture accounts, the department has brought in nearly $72 million in cash and assets through civil forfeiture, keeping nearly $47 million for itself and sending on almost $18 million to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and almost $7.2 million to the Illinois State Police, according to our analysis of CPD records. The Chicago Police Department doesn't disclose its forfeiture income or expenditures to the public and doesn't account for it in its official budget. Instead, CPD's Bureau of Organized Crime, the division tasked with drug and gang-related investigations, oversees the forfeiture fund in what amounts to a secret budget and off-the-book stream of income used to supplement the Bureau's public budget. The reader found that CPD uses civil forfeiture funds to finance many of the day-to-day operations of its narcotics unit and to secretly purchase controversial surveillance equipment without public scrutiny or city council oversight. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office, for its part, clearly indicates narcotics-related forfeiture income in its annual budget. According to its 2016 budget, the office used that year's expected forfeitures revenue of $4.96 million to pay the salaries and benefits of the 41 full-time employees of its forfeiture unit. I'm surprised that's not a paid position, but I guess the money's going to come from somewhere. The amount of money seized from any given individual is by itself negligible to police and prosecutors' budgets. The median value of a forfeiture in Illinois is $530, according to the Institute for Justice, a nonprofit libertarian public interest law firm. All right, so that's what the police department's secret budget is funded from. Well, let's look at where those civil asset forfeitures come from. Wow, what a shock. Poor neighborhoods are hit hardest by asset forfeiture in Chicago, the data shows.
Will there be provisions in this ordinance to ensure that Black and Latino Chicagoans are not disproportionately targeted, or is that inevitable since 95% of the people in the Chicago gang database are Black and Latino?
So again, let's be clear. We are going to be building cases based upon intelligence that's been gathered by law enforcement. We're not specifically relying upon the revised criminal enterprise system, but we will be building these cases and focused on those criminal, violent gangs that have a established hierarchy, and we're going to be targeting the leadership of those gangs.
This was from an article at Reason from 2017. Police in Chicago and its surrounding suburbs seized $150 million over the past 5 years. Those seizures were heaviest in low-income neighborhoods, according to public records. Law enforcement in Cook County, which includes Chicago, seized items from residents ranging from a cashier's check for 34 cents to a 2010 Rolls-Royce Ghost with an estimated value of more than $200,000. They also seized Xbox controllers, televisions, nunchucks, 12 cans of peas, a pair of rhinestone cufflinks, and a bayonet. Altogether, police in Cook County performed 23,065 seizures between 2012 and 2017 using asset forfeiture, including 5,939 vehicles, Chevrolet Impalas, among the most popular rental cars in the U.S., with a model most often seized. About three-quarters of all seizures occurred in Chicago. The average estimated value of seizures was $4,553, while the median value was $1,049. About three-quarters of all seizures were cash, not property. But civil liberties groups have often claimed asset forfeiture disproportionately impacts poor and minority communities. When these police seizures locations are mapped, it shows that although seizures happen nearly everywhere in Chicago, as we can all see on screen there, and the surrounding area, low-income neighborhoods like the South Side, the West Side were more frequently the targets of asset forfeiture. So when we hear that she wants to push this initiative through, it's being rushed through city council, and we know how it's already being abused, and we know how it's funding these secret budgets that nobody knows what the money's being spent on. I don't know, Ed. Could anything go wrong?
Oh, only everything.
ACLU of Illinois had a statement this morning that, among other things, called the ordinance undemocratic. They said that under state law, you have the power already to ask State's Attorney Fox to sue gang members. Why instead concentrate that power in an unelected corporation council?
I don't even really understand the nature of that question. It's not concentrating power in anyone. We file lawsuits on an affirmative basis all the time. Those lawsuits get filed, they go before a court, and the court is the arbiter of whether or not the city meets its burden of proof. So I don't even really understand that question. The Corporation Council doesn't have unilateral power to seize anyone's property, and that's not what this ordinance does. It allows and authorizes the Corporation Council to bring a lawsuit filed within a civil court, and then the chips will fall where they may based upon the determinations made by a circuit court judge. We need to have all the tools at our disposal to make sure that we are striking hard but fair blows against these violent criminal gangs that are terrorizing our neighborhoods. And for the people who are the critics, what I'd like to do is ask them to walk the streets of places like West Garfield Park, Austin, Roseland, other neighborhoods, Inglewood, across our city, where our people are afraid to come out of their homes. We have to push back against these violent criminal gangs, and we have to take their blood money that they are profiting from killing our children, our elders, and others.
Civil asset forfeiture is wrong to start.
Without
I
proper
can
due
see.
process.
No, it isn't, and I can see how since they already have a history of having done it, they feel that, well, if we just label everybody as a gangbanger, or we use it to justify, bringing in more revenue for the CPD, then that's just good for us, which isn't good for them, because it gets too complicated to really explain, but it comes down to, you're hurting the people you're supposed to be protecting.
Well, she made a point at her press conference, and maybe you saw this too. I watched as much of it as I could while I was prepping, that this isn't going to impact like the low-level drug dealer on the corners. They're going to go after the big-time drug dealers who love their money. And as Arturo Medina says in the live chat, this is the dumbest idea in the world. You can't sue the demons of the street who don't fear the justice system. Point well taken.
Yeah, and it's not like they're keeping all that money in an easily identifiable bank account, even if they find the people that they claim they're looking for.
Yeah. Well, that's where we are probably founded in our suspicions that this is going to be abused.